All right, if the members could introduce themselves, starting to my left with Representative O'Neill.
Tim O'Neill, 48th Legislative District in Washington County.
David Rowe, 85th Legislative District, Union, Snyder, Juniata, and Mifflin counties.
Good morning, Torrin Ecker, represent parts of Adams and Cumberland County in the south central part of the state.
Natalie Mahalik, right here in Allegheny County, Bethel Park, and parts of Washington County.
Josh Kale, Beaver, Washington counties.
Abby Major, Armstrong, and Westmoreland counties.
Good morning, everyone. State Representative Robert Ledbetter, representing the 109th District, consisting of all of Columbia County.
And we also have Representative Smith, who is joining us virtually. Representative Smith, you know the drill. If you have a question, hit the hand button, the raise button, and we'll get to you. Better off probably texting me and Dan to get a hold of us. But Representative Mahalik, thank you for having us here in your beautiful district. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces here. If you'd like to make some brief opening comments, the floor is yours.
I want to thank Chairman Kale for putting these policy hearings on. It's my understanding they've been traveling the state this week talking about these historic tax cuts that we can hopefully get done for the people of Pennsylvania. So I appreciate what you and your team have been doing, not just for this particular issue, but for a large part of our legislative issues that we would like to see get done in Harrisburg. My district office staff is here as well, so thank them for helping to put this all together. And to the municipality of Bethel Park for letting us use this awesome space where the Schoolhouse Arts and History Center is probably my favorite building in the entire district. So I'm glad to be able to show it off this morning. And thank you to the testifiers. One was just made aware he was testifying about 5 minutes ago. So we appreciate his cooperation and just happening by this morning and being here to talk about these tax cuts. You know, look, this is not only the right thing to do for the people of Pennsylvania, but it's the right time to do it. We're all feeling the squeeze. Every time I leave my house, I feel it. I know that you're all feeling it too. So to be part of something like this, where it would literally be the largest tax cut in Pennsylvania history, I think is a pretty amazing thing. And it should be a pretty easy thing for us to do. This is taxpayer money at the end of the day. And if we can find a way to not spend it and actually return it to the people who need it most, that's what we need to be doing in Harrisburg. So again, appreciate you going out and taking this message on tour. So I think it's really important for people to know what we're doing and to shine a light on a policy that's so important. So thank you to you and your team once again.
Thank you, Representative Mahalik. And I would like to give a shout out to my team, to the film guys, camera. Thank you guys for what you've done this week and a lot of weeks. This is our fourth hearing this week. We started the week off in Luzerne County, then we went to Montgomery County, which is not very close to where we're at right now. Yesterday we were in Johnstown, and then today we're here. They've traveled the state. They've done a great job. They've made sure the trains are on time and everything's working, and it's very much appreciated. So good job, guys. Good job, team. I appreciate the work that you guys have put in, not just this week, but every week for the policy committee. This is our 61st hearing, I believe, of this a cycle, and they are doing some very, very good work. So this is the last hearing on a series regarding these historic tax cuts. And to summarize what we have learned as we come into this hearing, I think it's pretty fair to say that we're seeing two visions coming out of Harrisburg. We have our friends on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats, whose vision is to take more resources from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, from our constituents, and spend more, make more decisions in Harrisburg. And then there's our vision, the opposite vision, which is to give more back to people, empower our constituents, let them make decisions with their own resources, let companies make decisions regarding how they want to invest. And that's what we're going to talk more about here today with our excellent panel. We have Elizabeth Stell, who is here, the Director of Policy at the Commonwealth Foundation. We have Jim Jenkins, a business owner here in the region, and Mr. Harrod, who is a citizen coming from Upper St. Clair. Is that right? Right off Fort Cox Road? Yeah, okay. So, Mr. Jenkins, I know that this is relatively new, the idea of you testifying here. We will certainly be lenient as far as testimony, but how this works is we give each testifier 3 to 5 minutes to talk about the subject matter at hand. If you go over 5 minutes, I won't gavel you out. There's not any real pressure, but we'd like to keep it within 3 to 5 minutes, because really what we want to accomplish here and what we like is the Q&A, the interaction, and we open it up for questions after the testimony. So that's basically how it works. Ms. Stell, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Kale. Thank you, Representative Mihalik, for hosting us today, and all the members who traveled out to learn a little bit more about these historic tax cuts. I'm Elizabeth Stell. I'm the Director of Policy Analysis for the Commonwealth Foundation, and we are very excited to see House Bill 2388 come about. And I want to set the context a little bit for the committee and help us understand not just why this is good policy, but as Representative McKellick mentioned, why the timing is really critical and why this is the right time to pursue broad-based tax cuts for Pennsylvanians. I want to note that we are in Western Pennsylvania, where we have a big problem. We have a population problem. We have shrinking population in every county except for Washington and Butler counties. And Allegheny County, unfortunately, has the infamous distinction of being on the Census Bureau's top 10 list of counties with the largest numeric decline from 22 to 23. This county lost almost 8,000 people in that time period. That's a big problem. Shrinking population means a shrinking economy. It means shrinking opportunities. And it means a heavier burden on the residents that are left behind. Pennsylvania is also an aging state. So one might think, wow, a lot of things are going wrong in Pennsylvania. But we have a huge opportunity to reverse this tide. And these tax cuts are a critical part of that. We know from looking at other states and from our own research that when you have lower broad-based tax burdens, you see a growing economy. And we have a lot of room to work with. The last time we reduced taxes, the personal income tax specifically in Pennsylvania, was the year I was born, so we'll call it 1980-something. It's been a while. Yeah, we have a big opportunity in front of us. And specifically, the time is now because we have people dealing with the squeeze of inflation. You've seen since 2021, the buying power for the average weekly wage has declined. People have essentially $2,712 less in terms of buying power than they did in January of 21. So folks are feeling the squeeze, which makes it all the more important that we give some of their hard-earned money back to them right now. But it's not just the personal income tax reduction that we're talking about in this bill. There's also the elimination of the gross receipts tax on electricity, which would benefit all Pennsylvanians, or at least all Pennsylvanians who use electricity, which is pretty much everyone. And that's a tremendous thing as well. So combined, the benefit for folks in Allegheny County in a family of 4 would be $536.72 under a full year of implementation. So this is really critical, not just for helping our residents today, but attracting more residents, specifically attracting working age residents that are going to help us expand the economy and overcome a fiscal situation in Pennsylvania that is looming. And I'll give you one stat just to show kind of what we're facing in the next few years. The Independent Fiscal Office, in their 5-year outlook in November, noted that the rate of acceleration for our long-term care appropriation, that's health care for our seniors, that's set to grow about 6% over the next 5 years every year. Our revenue growth at that same time frame, roughly 3%. So our costs for our seniors are growing twice as fast as the revenue coming in. That's a recipe for some really tough decisions. And the way we overcome that structural deficit, the way we prevent having to go back to our residents for more tax dollars is to do these broad-based tax cuts to stimulate the economy. And I'll note finally that not acting on these tax cuts would put Pennsylvania further behind. There is no status quo. If you look at what's happening in the states around us, New Jersey is reducing business taxes, Ohio is reducing personal income taxes. If you look across the country, 14 states cut personal income taxes and 6 states cut business taxes in 2024 alone. Just this morning, I was going through my emails. Kansas is going to move forward with their cut of the personal income tax. So if we are not looking at reducing taxes, we are falling further behind, and we're never going to be able to overcome the structural challenges that Pennsylvania face. But more importantly, we're going to see fewer opportunities for the good people of Pennsylvania and for future generations. So the time is now. And I'm very excited to answer any questions you might have about the legislation, and thank you for your time.
Mr. Harris.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me for this. This is quite impressive and quite important. House Bill HB 2388 is so nice. I mean, to get a few bucks back, you know, even more than a few bucks is wonderful. And hopefully next year we'll be talking about House Bill 2389, 90, 91, et cetera. Lots more money. But my name is Wayne Herod. Been a resident of Upper St. Clair for 45 years. Been married for 49 years, and actually today is my 49th anniversary. My wife's going to heaven, without a doubt. My background, Ms. Mihalik is smiling. My background is I was a basketball coach for 20 years at the high school level. I ran the Washington Wild Things Stadium baseball operations, stadium operations, and special events for 11 years. My interests are photography, writing, obviously basketball. I've written over 50 feature articles with my own photography for the Upper St. Clair over the years, which I really have enjoyed and met so many nice people. My comments on the bill is obviously it's wonderful, and there are so many areas that are hurting everybody, not only myself as someone with a fixed income, but utilities. I mean, it's like when I go to the store, it's almost like when I check out that I want to report a robbery and a mugging. It's that crazy anymore. An example is my wife drinks McCafe coffee. It's under $7 at Walmart. It's under $12 at Giant Eagle and Shop and Save, which I refer to as Giant Grocery Bill and Shop and Save Less. Utilities are just ridiculous. I mean, it costs you a couple bucks to flush your commode today because they get you for water and they get you for sewage. Gas, I mean, the profits in gas, these companies are making billions and billions of dollars. And on Memorial Day, they up it. Labor Day, they up it because everybody's driving. Not the fact that that gas is already in hundreds of thousands of gas stations in the ground that they've already paid less money for. We should get some of that back, the states. School taxes. Boy, I could go on for hours on that one, but I won't. Obviously, you have to have a good school district. It's very important. But as a senior citizen, I get nothing more back out of it than the value of my home, which only increases so much. My biggest concern in school district, and I know they put a cap, I believe, on it, is this charter school nonsense. If you send your kid to school, at a Catholic school or a private school, you pay out of pocket. If you send to a charter school, which is your own choice, you should pay out of pocket. The school district shouldn't have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to finance your kid's high school education when you have an excellent school district. It's just so much money, and it's leading to as many, I mean, the school taxes is like the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It's going to go up every year for 30 years. Final thing that's really getting crazy is insurance. I was told that since I turned 75, my insurance rates went up. I mean, I've driven 55 years, I've never had an accident, never had a ticket, but all of a sudden, I'm a big risk, so I got to pay more money. I mean, I drive less, I drive more careful, and they don't consider anything. I think it's a form of discrimination and another way of getting into my pocket. It's just discrimination, and just, it's not only, like I say, fixed income people, but it's everybody. I mean, it's just, it's like when I leave the house to go shopping, it's like my wallet wants to fly out of my back pocket. I spend $100 before I blink. What it means to me as a senior citizen is just that the fact that people are doing this is so important and so nice, and just everything is so good. I just hope it continues, and as I say, there's other areas that I'm sure you're addressing and will address. And again, I'd like to thank Ms. Mihalik and Jerron for inviting me to this. And I did want to thank, and I told her earlier, I wanted to thank Natalie for outing me as a poor old man. Thank you.
Mr. Jenkins, I know you're here on short notice. If you'd like to just give us a little bit of your background and what it was like running a small business here.
I'd be happy to. I've lived in Bethel Park all my life, 64 years. I guess I'll be a senior citizen in another 6 months or so. But I was a long-time business owner at a lawn and garden center in Upper St. Clair. I just recently sold it. I was there for 40 years. I saw the way taxes and these increases in everything affected me as a business owner as well. As this gentleman talked about, the taxes on the gas prices, the gas tax, utility taxes, it's just everywhere you turn, somebody else is getting into your pocket for a little bit more. As a business owner, it made it harder and harder and harder to be successful, because you can only raise prices so much because people have less money to spend because of taxes. I think that a 10% increase to the state income tax is a fantastic idea. You're to be applauded for that. I'm sure there's other things that could be done in the future. The gross receipts tax and the tax on the utilities and everything, reducing that is a very good idea as well. I'm involved with the Bethel Park Historical Society here. We've been very fortunate. We've been able to receive grants over the past several years. Representative Mihalik has been very helpful to us here with things that we've done here. But it's just everything. I mean, our water bill keeps going up here, the electric, the gas, the sewage, and it's got to level off somewhere. And it also has to have spending cuts as well, both on the state level and local level. It's government, county level, federal government, because it seems like anymore you go to work and you pay your bills and there's really not much left for a lot of people. And I really can see where the senior citizens, which I'm going to be, I guess, pretty soon here, it really has an effect as well. So this was short notice. That's about all I really have to say about this at the time. Again, I thank you for asking me to sit in here for somebody that didn't show up, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Representative Mihalik, would you like to start questions?
Sure. And again, thank you all for being here this morning. Elizabeth, I wanted to first ask you, Chairman Kale had mentioned the competing ideas. So this is a Republican idea. The Senate Republicans were able to get their bill over the finish line that does just this. It's cutting taxes. The competing idea is if we have more money, then we can spend more money. And we know in the governor's budget proposal this year, there are several new initiatives. I didn't see any plan for sustainability as far as some of those implementing some of those new programs would go. It seems like, okay, one-time spend. Okay, well, what happens next year? But there is a legitimate need for services in Pennsylvania. The state government provides, a whole host of services through the various state agencies. So I guess in terms of those competing ideas, if we're able to lower the personal income tax rate, would that ever be a situation that can lead to more revenues so that we can take care of those who are unable to take care of themselves and just to sustain some of our existing programs?
Yeah, you hit on a really key idea, which is we want to continue to fund the things that government should do, right? No one is here saying that we shouldn't, we should be fiscally irresponsible, right? But what we can do, and what we know we have to do, is we have to grow the economy if we are going to continue to even status quo fund our programs. We are on a trajectory to spend more. We have been spending more every single year than what we have been taking in revenue from the state's perspective. The rest of us here on this panel, we can't do that on our own personal budgets, but the state does that year after year after year. Now, the state is fortunate they have about 2 more years where they can spend more than they're taking in because of the savings from the federal COVID funding, right? We have money sitting in the checking account. But once that's gone, that's gone. Governor Shapiro's budget proposal includes additional spending in a lot of different areas, notably education, with no additional spending in future years. So there's no path forward as to how those expenditures are going to be sustainable given the revenue streams that we have. So the only way out of this, apart from asking for more taxes and more from the people of Pennsylvania, is to grow the economy so that our revenues can keep pace with our spending and ideally slow the rate of spending. In fact, one thing the Commonwealth Foundation has supported for a very long time is called the Taxpayer Protection Act. And the idea there is to slow the rate of spending. We're not even talking about cutting government spending, although we would be in favor of that as well. We would like to just slow the rate of government spending, and that would make it sustainable. That would ensure the services are sustainable for all Pennsylvanians, and we're not asking more from taxpayers year after year. So it's a win-win. And another thing I'll note is other states do this. We're talking about something pretty basic here. I mean, we're in a schoolhouse, the alphabet's right behind you. This is back to basic stuff. The way that you become competitive, the way you grow your revenue streams is by unleashing your economy. And this sort of infusion of dollars back into the economy will do that for Pennsylvania, and it will enable us to compete, not just with our neighbors, but with the entire country internationally. I mean, Pennsylvania needs to compete on an international stage.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, the 3-time co-sponsor, I think, of the Taxpayer Protection Act. I think that's something that's so important that I'd love to see get done during my time in the legislature. Wayne and Jim, I guess I'll go to you. You both kind of touched on it. And I think unlike the government handouts that we saw a lot during COVID or like a one-time stipend, this is different almost in the way that, when you work for private industry, do you want the raise or do you want the bonus? Well, I would want the raise because I can build off of that every year. It's not a one-time influx of cash. So is this something that, are you just going to be able to, plug the holes on your own spending just because of the prices of everything raised right now as far as utilities and groceries and shop and save less and all of the things that you mentioned? What does this mean for you personally?
I guess, I won't, it'll help in what you spend. I mean, it's not going to be money to go in the bank anymore. It's just, it's everywhere. I mean, everyone's aware of that. So, I mean, it's going to be a help because I won't run as short. I mean, we eat out less than we used to, obviously being older, less income, but everything's a help. It's not going to make me richer, but it's going to help almost everything you do today. If I have 20 extra bucks a week, maybe I'll pick up an extra pound, a couple pounds of meat, something like that. I mean, you're obviously going to spend it because, like I say, when you go out, better be prepared to spend. It's a crazy world out there, and it's not only the older people, it's everyone. I mean, everyone's taking a beating. I mean, I don't know how people have 4 and 5 kids today, or 3.
Well, one of mine just walked in, and you mentioned leaving the house, and $100 goes in the blink of an eye. Trust me, I'm well aware. I'm sure we'll spend $100 before she gets back home today. Jim, did you have anything to add to that?
I think that a 10% cut, it would also, in my opinion, help a lot of the employees that work for everybody. I know 10% less in state income tax over the course of a year would help employees that worked for me when I had my lawn and garden center, because a lot of times, every little penny, especially when you're younger and trying to get by and deal with the higher prices on everything. And myself as well, that'd be nice to have an extra 10% more of that state tax to spend for necessities.
Whip O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Kyle. So to be honest with you, Natalie just stole some of my questions, but that's okay. One of the things that I thought was interesting, Ms. Stell, is you talked about the rise in state spending that's occurred. So I just hit my 6-year anniversary since I've been sworn in, and in 2018, so because of when I came in at the beginning of June, this is actually my 7th budget that we're working on. In 2018, when I came in, I believe the number for the budget was about $36 billion. So in just 6 years, we're now considering a $48 billion budget. So that's something like 40% spending, if I have my math, maybe 70%. My math isn't doing very good this morning. I apologize. But a significant increase in spending in just 6 years. So I think it really highlights some of the things that Mr. Harrod highlighted as well, as far as increase of prices all across the board. We're certainly seeing what I would argue is out of control spending at the state level. And I think a lot of it has to do with exactly what you highlighted, in that the state has the ability to just spend other people's money indefinitely. And any given constituent or citizen across the Commonwealth can't do that. We need to ensure that we're not spending more money than we're actually bringing in. So I think it's the idea that, one of the things that we often talk about in Harrisburg, and you kind of, part of the question, Natalie's question kind of hit on it as well, as far as, revenue to Harrisburg. One of the things that I often think we get lost in as legislators when we're out in Harrisburg is talking about the state revenue. And the reality is that revenue is taxes we're taking from all of you. And we can't forget that. We need to be more concerned with our constituents' revenue than we are with the state revenue. As, of course, we still need to be responsible about budgeting at the state level and ensure that we're funding the programs that are important. But we can't get lost in this idea of the state revenue, and that's the thing that's the most important. One of the things that, as we think about that, and I was going to ask the exact impact of even a small $500 amount for all of you, which, like I said, Natalie stole my question there. So I don't actually have a question, but I would like to make one more point. So we're sitting in Allegheny County, I understand that, but I usually think about things from Washington County, which is obviously where I live and represent. And I can tell you, for every dollar of tax that a resident of Washington County sends to Harrisburg, we get about 70 cents back. So 70 cents for every dollar we send to Harrisburg, we get back in some investment, whether that's infrastructure or spending, whatever it is. If we look at Philadelphia, it's much closer to $1.50 for every dollar they send to Harrisburg. Obviously, that is the model, and that Chairman Kell kind of highlighted as far as the differing perspectives. The other side really wants to pick those winners and losers and to send it to places they want. This proposal will allow you all to best decide where you spend the money, and that's why we've made such a push to move in this direction. It's historic, again, because of the stat of the last time we actually did a tax cut. It's actually a very remarkable idea when it comes to Harrisburg. So I appreciate all of your testimony. I apologize, I don't have a question because Natalie stole it, but thank you all for being here. Yeah.
Thank you, Whip Bonell. Vice Chairman Eckert.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you guys for your testimony. I want to thank Commonwealth, for also coming along on these hearings, because they've provided, I think they've been in pretty much all of these hearings in some form, different policy directors. But every time that I'm at one of these hearings that we've done this, I think that these graphs and statistics that the Commonwealth has provided to us are really telling. And if you look at, there's a chart here that shows payroll growth by state. And it's pretty telling. It's a tale of two stories. It's Idaho, Utah, Texas, Florida. North Carolina, where tax policy has improved. They're the leaders in the U.S. as far as competitive tax policy, and they are seeing tremendous payroll job growth. Spin around, look at California, New York, New Jersey, and unfortunately Pennsylvania, where tax policy isn't as competitive. They have some of the lowest job growth. I think this is extremely telling. So Ms. Stell, can you just talk a little bit about, what is happening in these states like Idaho, Utah, Texas, and how this historic tax cut that we're talking about, which isn't just a personal income tax, it's also eliminating the gross receipts tax, which will benefit lots of other individuals that maybe don't have income. And when we talk about gross receipts tax, we're talking basically, to boil it down, it's a utility tax that everyone's paying on their energy bill. So, Ms. Stell, how are other states remaining competitive, having great tax policy? How can we start to improve and be just like those other states?
Yeah, happy to expound upon that. I'll note something that came out of an annual study that the American Legislative Exchange Council does, Rich States, Poor States, where they look at states and they figure out which states are most competitive and which states have, the best prospect of attracting more growth. And they say, and this is going to be common sense to everyone in this room, but it's still telling that states that spend less, especially those that spend less on income transfer programs, so read into that welfare, and states that tax less, particularly on productive activities like working or investing, personal income taxes. Those are the states that experience the highest rate of growth, and those are the states versus the states that tax and spend more. So it's a very simple formula. If you tax more, if you want more of something, you shouldn't tax it, right? So we want more workers, we want more income. We should be talking about reducing taxes on income. And it's bared out by the maps that we provided to you, and we're seeing this play out, all across the country, that the states are becoming increasingly competitive with their tax rates. It's becoming more and more challenging to keep up and to attract investment. And we also know that the broader based these lower tax rates are, the better they are for the economy as a whole, because government is never going to get it right when it comes to picking winners and losers. They're always going to make mistakes or not foresee something. And we know that when you have broader, stable rates, that you see more economic growth. And so it's no mistake that most Pennsylvanians, when you look at the migration, where are people going, they're going to states like Texas and Florida, where there's no personal income tax. They're going to states like North Carolina, where they are in the process of eliminating their personal income tax. So the trends are very clear. It's not rocket science to figure out what's driving growth in these other states, and there's no reason that Pennsylvania can't be a part of that conversation through House Bill 2388 and other good policy reforms that both members of this committee and other members of the caucus have put forth in the House.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, Whip O'Neill talked about, we're talking about taxpayer money here. That when we talk about lost revenues, we're talking about taxpayer money when we're talking about revenue. But something that also will affect revenue and loss is people leaving the state. If people want to move, if people move into the state, want to start businesses, raise families here, that's more taxpayers coming into the state, as opposed to a tax policy where people are out migrating, they're leaving the state. So that has a net effect as well. So I think it's being competitive and truly dominant with tax policy will have a net effect of increasing revenue in the state, because people want to live, work, and raise their families in Pennsylvania, which is, I know I want my kids to stay in Pennsylvania. They're running around somewhere here, but I want them to stay in Pennsylvania and raise a family and be successful. And we have got to create an environment to do that. And I think what the Senate did in passing the historic tax cuts in an overwhelmingly bipartisan manner, we have an opportunity in the House over the next week, I think, to put that up for a vote and show Pennsylvanians that we do care, we want to be competitive, and we want a robust tax policy. So I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Rowe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stell, I think this is probably the most telling map, right? I mean, this is jumping off of what Vice Chairman Eckert pointed out, the fact that this right here shows you can say what's wrong with Pennsylvania. Well, we're doing it better than California and New York, which is a pretty low bar, but we're losing to all of these states that are showing us how to do it a lot better. You look at, like you said, it's not rocket science, right? Lower taxes, less regulation equals a state that's just doing better than we are. This exodus from PA, however, you cited really well, it's not going to be status quo, right? You said we're falling behind. When you have, what did you say, 14 states are cutting personal taxes, 6 have cut business taxes?
Yeah, just in 24. So that's not counting the tax reductions that we saw in 22 and 23, and even some in 21.
And when was the last time Pennsylvania had a tax cut?
Personal income tax cut was in 1986.
Right.
Don't make me say it. But we did reduce corporate net income taxes last year. We're slowly continuing to phase down that rate. That's a great first step, but we know it's not enough.
And I think one of the important things to reference is that was an awesome first step. You know, we had the highest or second highest, depending on how you look at the progressive or flat rate compared to New Jersey. But the fact that we were able to do that first step is great. However, a lot of businesses in Pennsylvania don't pay the corporate net income tax, right? Almost every small business in Pennsylvania is a pass-through entity. So they actually pay the personal income tax rate, which means that this tax cut isn't just for people in our communities who need it. It's also for every small business that creates the opportunities, that sponsors our kids' soccer teams, that, you know, when you go to a community fundraiser and they have all the sponsors on the back of the shirts, it's all of your local small businesses. Those are the people funding our communities. And so this is absolutely something that'll help them as well. You referenced in the beginning of your testimony something like the regulatory permitting issues, and you know, just anecdotally, a couple of months ago, we had a policy hearing up in Columbia County, and one of the testifiers referenced a manufacturer who was going to locate in Pennsylvania, but instead went to Texas because they were told it'll take half. They said we can build it for you before Pennsylvania even gives you a permit, and they were right. It's up and running, and they never got a permit in PA. We had a large industry leave Union County, one of my counties, because they said it'll cost half as much and take half as long to just go build it in West Virginia instead. So if this trend continues, where if we don't get this tax cut done and we're stuck in status quo for another year, and we see 20 plus states cutting their taxes, improving their environment, well, what does that mean for us? How much further can we fall behind before we start to hit that fiscal cliff where the services that, you know, people, seniors rely on just don't exist anymore? Or then we have to raise tax. Are we going to have to raise taxes at some point if this exodus continues? What does this look like in 10 years if we don't get this done?
Well, thank God for New Jersey and New York, because they're helping us stay afloat with all the people coming across the border for cheaper cost of living. And Pennsylvania is becoming known, I think, as a great place to retire because of some of our tax policies related to senior citizens. But that's not going to be enough. We're going to be looking at structural deficits, which will lead to either tax increases or borrowing. We're not going to be able to pay down the liabilities we already have. And what that really means, too, is more burden on fewer people, which is just going to accelerate the migration trends we're seeing. It's going to create even less opportunity and innovation in the state. And one thing I'll just note, going back to the small businesses, I'm glad you brought that up, but this is, you know, essentially a small business tax cut in addition to money back in the pockets of all Pennsylvanians. The latest data we have on how many small businesses pay the personal income tax is from 2020. And that year, small businesses, there were over 825,000 small businesses that paid the PIT. Their net profits, their mean net profits, when you look at that number and you factor in this tax cut, you're talking about each small business owner about $61,677 in 2020, the mean net profits. So that's a substantial sum for small businesses as well, that they would see that boost, and we know that would beget more job creation, raises, et cetera, it goes on and on and on. There's really no way that we can fully articulate all the different benefits that a personal income tax reduction would ripple throughout the economy. But we know what doesn't work. And so I think Pennsylvania is in a very strategic place because we have the opportunity to learn from our neighbors around us, and we still have the advantage of being very close to hubs of industry, hubs of people. And so evening the playing field between some of our neighbors like West Virginia could really be a game changer.
And I will just ask this, I think I already know the answer, gentlemen, but the CPI having increased almost 20% since the beginning of 2021, have you guys gotten a 20% adjustment in either your income or retirement income?
Definitely not.
I'll second that emotion.
So is it safe to say that if the majority of Pennsylvanians are having to tighten their belts to make ends meet in this inflationary environment, that the Pennsylvania government should do the same?
Without a doubt, Pennsylvania, in my opinion, there's way too many people working for the state that don't really do a lot. It's a nice way to put it.
Well, very well.
I'll second that emotion again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions before I wrap it up with some closing questions? Anything? One thing that we have been fortunate to do with the policy committee is go around the state and talk to different industries and understand different regions of the state. And one of the things that has been remarkable, and Ms. Stowe, you kind of touched on this a little bit, that we have found is the incredible opportunities that we have in Pennsylvania. Just geography, where we're located, and how that impacts selling to different markets, the natural resources, whether it's natural gas, potatoes, or peaches and apples, and anything basically that can come out of the ground, we have it here in Pennsylvania. Manufacturing, which is obviously a derivative of those natural resources. And as I reflect on all of the different things that Pennsylvania can bring to the table and has brought to the table over the course of the last 150 years, the fact that we are in decline, the fact that we're losing, I think is political malpractice. I think it's absolutely crazy that a state that has all of its natural resources next to the largest group of individuals with the largest buying power in the world, when you look at the northeast portion of the United States, is something that we ought to be ashamed of as legislators, as people that are trying to make positive changes. And it's not something that's happened just in the last couple of years. You're talking about a problem that's been there probably for the last 70, 80, 90 years. With these different rules and taxes and regulations that have gone into place. And on one side, it's cause for serious alarm. On another side, it's cause for optimism, because I sincerely believe that if we can get out of the way in Harrisburg, meaning lower taxes, cut regulations, if we could do that in Harrisburg, this state can see a fundamental transformation with jobs, with people coming in, with young people wanting to stay here, with my kids and their generation enjoying opportunities here in a very, very quick time frame. So it's cause for optimism, it's cause for concern. And I guess my question, Ms. Stowe, for you is, from a macro standpoint, could you list a couple of the things? I know tax reform is a big one, but what else? What should our priorities be as a legislature to correct the path that we've gone down and to ensure that we can have that prosperous future?
Thank you for that question. These are the type of questions that think tank people love to answer. Apart from the tax reductions in this bill, there are other things in our tax code we could address. I mentioned previously combining the different categories of income to make it a more simple process. But also, one thing that I know is gaining a lot of traction in the Senate as well, the startup penalty and operating loss reform is another really critical piece of the puzzle. In addition to that, we need to look at the hidden taxes, and by that I'm talking about our regulatory burden in Pennsylvania. That is just as much, if not more, I think has an impact on how people choose to invest, whether they choose to stay in the state or whether they choose to look elsewhere. So we have a lot of work to do on that front as well. Pennsylvania ranks 12th in the nation in terms of our regulatory burden. Not a list you want to be near the top of. So a lot of work there that we could also do, and there's a lot of great proposals in the legislature to address that. And then the other piece we've touched on a little bit, it's very basic, but it's extremely important, and that is controlling spending. I think that's just as important for business development as tax rates, because that is protection against future tax hikes. So that is a major piece of the puzzle for Pennsylvania to maintain slow, if not zero spending growth, as we pursue these other tax reforms, regulatory reductions, and just make it easier to do business in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And right now, unfortunately, we have a reputation for being a difficult place to do business, and we have a long way to go to change that.
Go to my last question. It's for you, Mr. Jenkins. As a business owner, I think far too much of the public doesn't quite appreciate what it means to make payroll, what it means to pay vendors, what it means to keep a place open, pay rent, pay bills, pay all these other things. We just, see us giving money to a business and we think that's the money that they're getting. With tax cuts, with getting more of your money back, if you're in that situation, what's a business owner going to do with that, with that more resources?
Well, more than likely, at least in my experience and what I did, anytime there was a chance to get a tax break, I would spend that money on things to better my business and make it better for my employees and my customers, to keep the money flowing through the economy instead of not doing anything with it. On the federal side, there was Section 179 depreciation, which was a fantastic thing for businesses. You could write off newly purchased assets, certain types of assets, trucks and equipment. You could write them off at 100% the first year, whereas on your Pennsylvania state tax return, you could only take 25% of that. So that's another thing as far as tax breaks to look at for businesses, to possibly look at that to make this Pennsylvania state tax program equal to what the federal government gives to businesses. And being in business wasn't easy. It's not easy. And like you said, everybody sees a business bringing in all that money, supposedly, but they don't really see how much goes back out. And when you get down to the end of it, there's just very little left for the owners usually.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. I really appreciate you coming here today. Mr. Jenkins, special thank you to you on the spot. That's one of my policy hearing favorite moments now of the year. It's just Mr. Jenkins popping in and just, yeah. You did great. You all did great. Very much appreciate Representative Mihalik. If you'd like to give brief closing remarks, and I'll close it out.
Sure. Thanks again, everybody, for coming, whether you had a lot of notice or just a little bit. We appreciate the insight and just being able to flesh this out a little bit more, and what a huge opportunity this could be for Pennsylvania. And we've heard, our numbers in the rankings. We want to be open, not just for businesses, but for people to choose to live, work, and play here. So I've got my group of summer interns from the district office here in the back, and that's exactly the type of people that we want to be attractive to. They're going to college in the state, but when they leave, what happens? Do they find a better job offer? And does that offer, also look at the tax burden of wherever they could go? So we hope that they all stay in Pennsylvania. And this is just one part of the solution to actually make it more livable, a better place to work, a better place to raise your family, where you're not overly burdened with taxes and regulations. So I think this is a huge, huge opportunity for Pennsylvania moving forward. And I want to thank everybody, video, staff, Chairman Kale's staff and all of my colleagues for being up here to learn a little bit more about it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mihalik. Thank you for having us here. Thank you to the reps that came here and to the staff. This is a closing of a series of 5 hearings on these historic tax cuts. And I just would like to close by saying how important it is that we keep our minds future-minded. We keep ourselves future-minded, because that's what this is about. I think in Harrisburg, from the opposition, the other side of the aisle, what you see are people that are in the moment looking at different things and not thinking about long-term consequences to how things will actually end up playing out. Because this isn't about the present, this is about the future. This is about our kids and their generation and whether they're going to be able to prosper in Pennsylvania or whether they're going to have to go elsewhere to pursue their dreams. But Pennsylvania has so much going for it that if we can get out of the way in Harrisburg, we will see a future here where Pennsylvania will once again be the keystone state for our nation's economy. That's a reality that we can have. And this is a first step to starting that and to have those conversations. So I'm looking forward to more conversations about tax cuts, these tax cuts in particular, and others, and talking about how we can be a more effective and efficient state government so that we can move our Commonwealth forward. So thank you, and this is the end of our hearing on the historic tax cuts. Until we gather again as a policy committee, this hearing is adjourned.